Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Neha Tulsyan from Creation. I'm so glad you're joining me today. In today's video, I'm using the Fawn Magic Iris Birdhouse add-on die to create some shaped cards. I try to use my craft supplies in various ways than is intended to, but there is always a risk. The idea in my head may or may not work. And this was one of those projects where I almost gave up once or twice, but I'm glad that everything worked out at the end. I'm going to share all of those with you in this video. So let's get started. I started with creating the base of my birdhouse cards. And for creating the base, I took a cardstock, folded it in half and placed the birdhouse die in such a way that the top part of the birdhouse die is not on the cardstock. When I roll this through the die cutting machine, the die will not cut the cardstock all the way through the top, and I will get a card base for my birdhouse card. And in this video, I have created 3 birdhouse cards sharing 3 different variations, of which one is a shaker birdhouse card. And I'm going to start with sharing how I created the shaker base first. So once my card base was ready, I die cut 2 birdhouse using some fun foam. And I have glued those 2 fun foam birdhouse together using some liquid glue. And here I'm just trimming off this fun foam die cut from all the sides before gluing it to my card base to make sure that nothing shows from the sides when I glue this to my card base. Here I have die cut a pattern paper from my stash using the same birdhouse die, and now I'll start creating my shaker walls. Since my birdhouse is open from both sides, I will have to create my shaker using clear sheets. So here I'm adding some tape to the back side of my pattern paper, and I will adhere a clear sheet on it. Next, trimming off any excess sheet that's hanging off the die cut. Once the clear sheet is glued to the pattern paper die cut, I will glue the fun foam die cut on top of it, making sure I line up the center window, and this will create my shaker well for my shakers to shake. Trimming off any excess fun foam that's hanging off the side. Now adding some anti-static powder tool to the acetate sheet, making sure that there is no static when I close this window with another clear sheet. For my shaker material, I'm adding Valentine hearts, clay bits and silver seed beads from my store. If you're new to my channel, let me tell you that my friend and I have recently opened an Etsy store, and we carry embellishments and blinks that can be used for card making, scrapbooking or any such crafty projects. At first I just wanted to add the clay hearts to my shaker well, but then I decided I wanted to go with some seed beads too, as seed beads make the best shaker sounds. Here I'm using my fingers and making sure that everything is leveled and that everything is within the shaker well, so that I can close the shaker well with a clear sheet and my shaker will be ready to shake. Here I just added some double-sided tape and now gluing down my clear sheet, and my shaker is almost ready. Again trimming off the excess sheet that's hanging off, and now I'll glue my shaker front to my card base using some double-sided tape. Being careful to line up the edges, making sure everything lines up. Once I'm happy with the alignment, I'll press it down to make sure everything is glued together nicely. So here you can see I have a perfect birdhouse card with shaker showing from both sides. Now let's move on to creating the base of the next card. We'll first create all the birdhouses with their card base and then decorate them all together later. So for this birdhouse, I die cut the front panel using wood grain cardstock from Fawn, and now I'm inking it up using vintage photo distress oxide ink. You get different colors in this wood grain cardstock from Fawn, but I like to keep white in handy, as I can ink it up in any color I want and use it on my projects. So once I'm done inking with vintage photo distress oxide ink, I wanted the birdhouse to be a little more darker, so I'm using ground Expresso distress oxide ink and inking up the edges of the birdhouse. It looks something like this once all done. I've already die cut a white card base for this birdhouse, the same way I die cut the previous one. And now I'm using my liquid glue from Burley Arts, and I'm going to adhere the front panel to the card base. Now let's decorate this birdhouse card. I have already die cut these scalloped edges of the birdhouse using white cardstock, and now I'm inking these using the mini blending tool from Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink, and I'm using whatever ink is left in the tool. I'm not bringing any more of the ink from the ink pad, and now I'll use my liquid glue to glue it down on the birdhouse. Gluing the bottom scallop on the birdhouse. Now you can leave it just as is and not glue anything at the back, but I like to make things tidy, so I decided to glue the scalloped edges on the top and the bottom at the back of the birdhouse. And here, to make sure that my card opens properly, I'm just scoring that back scalloped border that I just adhered. And once I have that score line in place, I'm gonna glue the tips using some liquid glue and hold it with some clip to make sure that everything is nicely glued together. Gluing the bottom scalloped edge here, and my birdhouse card is ready. Now I just have to decorate this birdhouse and this card will be ready. But before I start working on the images, let me put together my third birdhouse card. For this birdhouse, I chose this beautiful heart pattern paper from my stash, and the chili pepper cardstock from Lawn Fawn was a perfect match with this pattern paper. So I made the card base using the chili pepper cardstock from Lawn Fawn. And for the scalloped borders, I die cut these from gold mirror cardstock. I first thought of die cutting these from white, but I did not like the look of white on top of the pattern paper that I had here. And then I remembered that I got these gold mirror cardstock from Michaels, and these matched perfectly with the gold hearts on the pattern paper. Carefully gluing the tips after scoring the back, making sure everything is glued together properly. And that's it, this birdhouse is ready. Now coming back to my shaker birdhouse, we put together the birdhouse, but we did not decorate with the scalloped edges. So here I am adhering the scalloped edges that I die cut using silver cardstock. And since this shaker card is open from both sides and the shaker bits are seen from both sides, I decided to decorate the back the similar way as I decorated the front. So I die cut another birdhouse using the same pattern paper, and I'm gluing that down at the back of the card, and also glued down the scalloped edges at the back. And this is how all three of my birdhouses look. Now let's work on the images. I'm stamping these images from the new stamp sets from Lawn Fawn called Special Delivery and Special Delivery Box stamp sets. And I stamped them all using Crunchy Leaf ink pad from Lawn Fawn. Crunchy Leaf ink pad from Lawn Fawn is brown in color and it is copic friendly. And I'm so glad I decided to use this to ink my images today, because all the images that I colored today look like that I have done no line coloring. It was so effortless and it was similar to coloring any black image, but you get the effect of no line coloring, which is just amazing. All the copic markers used are listed on the screen on the top right corner. If you have been following me from long, you know that I prefer coloring my images using copic markers. And I like to use minimum of 3 colors while coloring any image to get a better blend and the 3D look that we are looking for in any image. I also like to color my images twice, so once I've finished coloring with all my 3 or 4 markers that I'm using, I'll just go back with all my markers and color the image again. It just gives you a better blend between all the 3 colors and the colors come out more vibrant. But I don't do that every single time. It depends on image to image. If I feel that I already have a good blend, I wouldn't go back and put on a second layer. But sometimes some images or some colors need a second layer for a better blend. So it just depends on image to image, and also depends on how close my colors are and if they have blended together nicely. For example, the owls here that I colored, I did not add a second layer to these images, but now that I'm coloring this bird, I will have to go back and color it twice so that I get a better blend between the colors that I'm using here. So for this bird here, I added my darkest shadows with the R39, and then I brought in R35 to blend that R39 a little bit. And lastly, for my highlight color, I used R32 copic marker. And you can see I'm going back with the second layer here. It was really needed. It felt like the R35 and R32 did not blend as beautifully as I would want them to, but giving a second layer actually made them blend better. Now I'm using my black gel pen to draw the eyes. Since I stamped the images with brown ink pad today, the eyes kind of got lost while coloring. So drawing the eyes back using the black gel pen just helps bring this whole image to life. And while I was at it, I even added some eyelashes to this bird. And now I'm using my white gel pen and adding some dots to the cheeks of this bird, and also some highlights to this bird image. Coloring the wings of the birds here using the same R markers. Now, usually for the letters inside the envelope, we color them in cool gray markers since we want them to be white, but we want to add some kind of shadow and don't want to keep the whole image completely white. But since I stamped these images in brown, instead of using cool gray markers, I'm using E markers. So I'm using E31 as my darker shade and E30 as my lighter shade to add some shadows to these envelopes and the letter inside the envelope, but still keeping them white. Lastly, coloring this bag that is carried by our owl using some YG markers. I'm using YG99 as my darker shade and pulling that color a little bit inside using YG97. Lastly, blending everything with my lightest color, that is YG93. Here I'm coloring the cap using some lighter green color. I'm using YG17 as my darkest color. I'm using YG13 as my next color to blend out that YG17. And lastly, I'm using YG01 as my lightest shade here, blending everything out. Once everything is colored, I'll use the coordinating dies to die cut all these images. I also die cut few of the leaves and flowers that comes with the birdhouse die set using some white cardstock. And I'm going to quickly color these die cuts using my copic markers that are already out here on my work desk. I have a lot of colorful cardstock in my stash, but I always tend to go towards the white cardstock while doing such die cutting. It's because I prefer to match these decorative elements with the images on my projects. But you can always choose to die cut these using color cardstock and skip the coloring altogether. Now that all the coloring is done, I'll go ahead and glue these to my wood grain birdhouse using some liquid glue. Now let's go ahead and glue the images to these birdhouses. And since our birdhouse card has window on both sides, whatever we put inside or on that window, you're gonna see the back of it too. So I wanted to make the back pretty too. So here I'm gluing two wings together. And now I'm gonna glue the two birds together. So this way, whichever side you look, you're gonna see the pretty bird. But this only works if you have a symmetrical image. And I thought that my bird image is symmetrical until I glued it together when I saw that the top hair part of the bird is not symmetrical. For this, you need to do the mirror stamping to get that symmetrical image, so that you can glue them together. But luckily, this was an easy fix for me. I just made the bird wear the cap, which is a symmetrical image. Next, I wanted this bird to hold an envelope on its beak. So I stamped the beak separately and put the envelope, and then on top added the beak using some liquid glue, and the bird was ready. I'll wait for it to dry before I glue it to my birdhouse. Now working on my second birdhouse. In this birdhouse, I decided to add just the box with all the envelopes in it. So here I just used my craft knife to make a slit in the box. The coordinating die for the special delivery box add-on set does come with a die that cuts that slit in the box, but I just used my craft knife because it was in front of me, and here I'm stamping the sentiment for you on those envelopes with letters using jet black ink from Lawn Fawn. Now I'm going to glue all the envelopes to the box using my liquid glue from Barely Arts, and it's gonna look like as if the box is overflowing with mails. Once I'm done gluing all the envelopes, I will also glue down this heart image from the same special delivery box add-on stamp set, showing that the box is filled with mails from loved ones. Now gluing this whole thing to the inside of the birdhouse, and this is where I started not liking this whole idea. I always like things finished and tidy, and while I was doing this, I could see all the glued images from the back, and it wasn't pretty as this bird here. And also both the images, the bird and the box with mails, did not have enough support at the back, and it felt like they might just fall off. So I still didn't know what to do, and I wasn't ready to give up as I was so into the project. So I was thinking what I wanted to do while I was gluing the owl for my third birdhouse. While I was gluing the owl down, I was also debating in my mind if I wanted to add another owl image at the back on this birdhouse to make sure that nothing shows from the back. But luckily, because of the shaker materials, almost everything was hidden. A little bit of the owl wings could be seen, but I was okay with it. And by this time, I had an idea to save my two other birdhouse. And here I took apart the images that I glued inside both the birdhouse, and I decided to cover the circle window with another circle die cut. I used the second largest die from Simon Says Stamp Stitched Circle Die set, and I die cut a vellum circle for my wood grain birdhouse. This die cut is just a slightly bigger than the circle window that we have on our birdhouse, and it has this beautiful stitched detail at the edges that makes the die cut look finished when you put it on the birdhouse. And since I'm using vellum here, I needed to hide the glue, so I die cut another birdhouse from white cardstock, and I'm gluing that into the inside of my card, sandwiching the vellum in between and making sure that no glue shows. Here, trimming off the excess from the top. Now gluing down my bird in place, making sure adding glue only to the cardstock and not on vellum. It was a good idea to use the vellum here, as you can still see the bird, and there is enough support for the bird to sit on properly. For this card, I just used the circle die cut. I did not have to use a birdhouse die cut, as I didn't have to worry about hiding the glue since I was just using cardstock and not vellum. Now all the three of my birdhouses were ready, and I'm pretty happy with the results. Here is a look at all the three birdhouses, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, especially the adding the circle die cuts. I think it was really good that I added the circle die cuts here. Just got a little bit of ink at the back of this birdhouse, so I'm using my sand eraser to remove that excess ink. And this eraser really works. It removed almost all the ink. Now it's time for the sentiment, and I'm using this sentiment strip from Simon Says Stamp. This is the Valentine theme sentiment strip from Simon Says Stamp, and I wanted to use the I love you from there. So I'm trimming that out using my paper trimmer. I'm gonna use this on the birdhouse with gold hearts, but I did not like the black color. I decided to gold foil my sentiment. I'm sorry I lost all the footage of me foiling these sentiments, but I just used my laminator, and in a copy paper I kept my strip and then the foil with pretty side facing up, and just passed it through the laminator once my laminator was ready. I actually foiled the whole sheet with the gold foil, and now I'm just cutting the strips and using the sentiment on the birdhouse. So the first one reads, "Sending you hugs and kisses." For my next birdhouse, I decided to stamp the sentiment, "Sending lots of love," in the inside of the birdhouse card. And lastly, for my shaker birdhouse, I did a little bit of stamp surgery and stamped the sentiment, "Special delivery," in the inside of the card. Don't be afraid to cut your clear stamps if you have to. You can always put them back together as they were intended to. Lastly, for finishing touches, adding some heart embellishments from our Etsy store. And that's how I created these birdhouse cards. I hope you guys liked it and will give it a try. If you did, like and subscribe to my channel, and do comment about which one is your favorite of all the 3 birdhouses. I'm so grateful that you take the time to comment on my videos. I love chatting with you, so please keep commenting, and here are a few more videos that you might like to watch. Thank you for visiting. Have a nice day.